What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for the newest DC animated movie, The Reign of the Supermen. If you've been following my channel and you watched my review for The Death of Superman, you would know that it is one of my favorite DC animated movies ever made. I really think that they did an incredible job with the animation, the character development, and making me care about not only Superman, but other people who would be sad about his death, as well as the relationship between him and Lois. And I think that movie was a great movie, so obviously I was excited for the sequel, and I gotta say, The Reign of the Supermen is an extremely disappointing sequel. Before I talk about the negatives of this movie, I want to go over the positives a little, although there aren't really that many, and most of them that are positives are just defaults from the fact that the death of Superman was so good. Specifically, even in this movie, I did really care about the characters of Clark Kent and Lois Lane. I do really care about their relationship, so even in this movie where I don't think it was done well at all, I still cared that when Superman came back, it was at least a little bit emotional, and the animation is pretty solid. The fight scenes, for the most part, are pretty good, and there are certain characters that I do enjoy, but I wouldn't say I love any characters in this movie, and there are many problems, so I will go over those problems right here. So first of all, I want to talk about the premise of this movie, The Reign of the Supermen, and the whole premise is Superman is dead following the death of Superman, and 4 new Supermen take his place, those being the Eradicator, Cyborg Superman, Superboy, and Steel, and I don't think any of them were handled well, except for maybe Cyborg Superman, but going by them one at a time, I don't think Superboy was given enough lines or enough screen time, so because of that, he didn't really have much of a personality. We didn't see him react that much to any of the huge revelations, like he's a clone. He obviously did react to it a little bit, but just comparing his reaction to the reaction in Young Justice, it feels like he had basically no reaction. It didn't feel like he cared all that much. He was basically like, oh, I'm a clone, thanks for telling me that, and then he moved on completely, which I really didn't like that. In general, I think Superboy was a cool character, and I do think that they have potential with this version of the character, but in this movie, he wasn't really given anything to do. He was mostly just there as a prop for Lex Luthor, which if you saw my review for The Death of Superman, Lex Luthor was the only part of that movie that I really didn't like. The voice actor is terrible, and it doesn't help this movie that he was given even more screen time than the last one. He definitely makes this movie a little bit worse because the voice actor is just so damn bad. But Superboy himself, he was not given enough screen time or lines, and as such, he just didn't have much of a personality or a character arc or any character development either. For Steel, he was pretty boring. I think they really should have shown his connection to Superman a little bit more, which is that he was saved by Superman once, and he feels like he has to pay him back for that, so he becomes Steel. They didn't really show that at all. I think they should have. In general, Steel was pretty boring. Eradicator was nothing. I mean, if you watch the movie, he was not even a character. He was just a hologram, and I do think that he was nothing. Cyborg Superman, like I said, it was the only one of the 4 that was handled at least a little bit well, but I think they could have done him better as well. So, Cyborg Superman is the main villain of this movie, like he is in the comics, although in the comics it's with Mongol, while here it is with Darkseid, which is a change I don't necessarily mind, but I just don't understand why they did it. I get that they're kind of interchangeable, at least in this storyline. They're interchangeable, but we've never seen Mongol in this universe, while we have seen a pretty poorly done Darkseid in Justice League War, and he was even worse in this movie. I think they should have just used Mongol. I don't really understand the change. But anyway, Cyborg Superman is the actual main villain in this movie, and he was pretty good, but he wasn't great. His motivation fell a little bit flat, and there's one change I would have made to him, or the whole movie really, that would really have made his motivation hit that much harder, which is I would have started the movie with a scene showing the scene from The Death of Superman where his whole ship was destroyed. This time we see the actual impact of him being affected by that, like he reacts to the death of his wife, he gets repaired by either Darkseid or just a shadowy figure that's later revealed to be Darkseid to just keep the twist that I thought was a pretty bad twist in this movie, and I think that would have made his motivation really hit that much harder, because his whole motivation is that he loved Superman and he thought Superman would save him, but then when Doomsday came to hit his ship, his wife died, and he practically died, but then he was saved, so he blamed Superman because Superman doesn't or didn't save him, which I knew that motivation from the comics, but in this movie, although it is definitely shown to us and told to us, I don't think it's shown or really shown to us well enough to make it a good motivation for the character. It would have been a lot better if they just started the movie showing us the cause of his whole thing and why he Cyborg Superman, really setting him up as the most important of the 4 new Supermen, which he obviously easily is. So getting past the new Supermen in this movie, I want to talk about Superman himself and his return from the dead, because in the death of Superman in that movie, like I said so many times, his death scene was somehow incredibly emotional, despite the fact that I knew for a fact he was going to come back, and I've seen that same scene and that same storyline twice before in movies, as well as once before in a comic book, although he has died multiple times in different comic books. The one that he died to Doomsday was the death of Superman, and somehow it was not only emotional, but it was easily more emotional than any other time Superman has died before, although Justice League Hereafter episode, that comes really, really close. They're probably tied with the death of Superman being emotional. So anyway, because of that, I expected his return from the dead to be emotional as well. Obviously, it would be incredibly emotional for a loved one to come back from the dead, and since I care about Lois and Clark's relationship from the death of Superman, I think it should have been emotional, but it wasn't like at all. Like he returned from the dead, and it didn't feel like anybody was really that impacted by it. It didn't feel like Lois herself was all that impacted by it either. It didn't feel like anybody really was surprised that he was alive. It just felt like they were expecting it, and it just made the whole return of Superman very, very not emotional and very not impactful. And the fact that that is the ending of this movie, the climax of the movie, doesn't help the movie whatsoever. Also, when he came back, Superman looked really stupid. I mean, I get this is what he looks like in the comics with the long hair and the black suit, and I like the fact that he wore the black suit, but they really should have skipped the long hair and the stubble that he has, because it makes him look kind of ridiculous in this art style, at least, which isn't a huge criticism, but just pairing that with the fact that his return, I mean, it wasn't emotional at all, didn't land well at all, really makes this movie feel not great, especially when compared to its predecessor. One thing that probably pissed me off more than anything in this movie was the use of the Justice League. Now, one thing I do understand is that how do you really make a Superman story without including the Justice League? Because Superman is super powerful, he has to fight a super powerful villain, but if he's fighting a super powerful villain, why would the Justice League not help out? This is not a problem for obviously like Batman. Flash usually fights less powerful or speedsters, so the Justice League couldn't really help out, or they don't really need to help out. Green Lantern's usually in space. Wonder Woman's usually fighting some either personal or magical villain who is Greek godly or something like that, etc., etc. It's really mainly a problem for Superman. How they handled that in this and the last movie wasn't great. In the last movie, they made them look pretty useless by Doomsday defeating them pretty easily, and then Superman defeats Doomsday by himself. Granted, he did die, but still he did defeat Doomsday, while the rest of the Justice League could not do anything, which kind of bothered me. I mean, what's the point of the Justice League if Superman is more powerful than all of them combined? But it didn't really bother me to the point that it annoyed me, because narratively it made sense. In this movie, what they did to the Justice League is, first of all, they just made them bodyguards to the president, and they do mention this, how this is kind of degrading to them just being bodyguards, so that's, I guess, fine. But what they did here is they literally shoved all the members of the Justice League into one condensed area and then dropped a portal on them, and that sent them to who knows where. I don't even know where. I don't think they explained it, where they went. And this whole sequence of events was some of the stupidest thing I have ever seen in my life. I mean, all of this was so ridiculous. First of all, they forced all the members of the Justice League into one condensed area, all under the portal. Then when they dropped the portal, you really need to tell me that in those, 2 seconds, Batman couldn't have grappled out of there, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Hawkman, Martian Manhunter, and Cyborg couldn't have flown out of there, and you really mean to tell me that the Flash didn't have enough time to realize that a portal was falling down on his face and the rest of the Justice League, and run not only himself out of there, but the rest of the Justice League out of there as well? This is ridiculous. Now, again, I do get they needed to get rid of the Justice League in this movie, but they really, really should have thought of a better way. I mean, this just felt incredibly lazy, incredibly tacked on, and on top of that, The whole part of the Justice League dying in this movie was handled incredibly poorly. First of all, a portal was dropped on their head. I mean, did really anybody think that they're dead? I mean, not only the audience, but the people in that universe as well. Secondly, they were shown to know or think that they are dead, and yet they didn't react to it whatsoever. So while I don't think they should have thought that they were dead, but now that they do, they should at least react to it. It doesn't seem like they care. Just looking at what Kat Grant said, she was sad about their deaths, but she was happy that the Superman is back in the form of Cyborg Superman. It really didn't seem like the Justice League matters in this universe. I mean, they don't matter against Doomsday. The world doesn't care about them, so what the hell is the point of the Justice League at all? Other things about this movie is that the pacing's a little off, the voice acting's not great at times, and there's a lot of humor that really doesn't land. So The Reign of Superman is, in my opinion, on par with most mediocre DC animated movies. Everyone says that Marvel's good at live action, DC's good at animated movies, and that's true, but I think Marvel's a lot better at live action than DC is at animated movies, because DC does make a lot of mediocre and bad animated movies, and Reign of the Supermen is one of those mediocre ones. They have a lot of great ones, like The Death of Superman, Flashpoint Paradox, Batman Under the Red Hood, and a lot of other ones, but there's others like The Reign of the Supermen that just is, in my opinion, okay. It should have been a lot better than okay. I think a big problem with this movie is that it's based off a comic book that isn't actually even that great. The Death of Superman isn't a great comic book either. It's literally just Superman fighting a monster, and then they just killed each other. It's not really a lot of depth to that story, but it worked in the movie, The Death of Superman, because they used it in a way that was very emotional. The Reign of the Superman in the comics is not a very good comic book either. All it was introducing 4 new characters and bringing Superman back to life in a pretty stupid way that makes it impossible for him to ever die in the future, and if he does, he can just come back to life. It's not a great storyline, and I don't think that storyline had a lot of potential for a movie either, and they made it into one, and it kind of fell a little bit flat. In my opinion, they should have just created an entirely new storyline to bring Superman back, not really focus on these 4 other Supermen, maybe one other Superman. They did something similar in Superman Doomsday, and in my opinion, the second half of Superman Doomsday is a lot better than the Reign of the Supermen, while the first half of Superman Doomsday is much worse than the Death of Superman, because Reign of the Superman in the comics is not a good storyline, and in the movie, it's not a good storyline. But anyway, Reign of the Superman was a pretty okay movie. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was just okay, but it really needed to be great because its predecessor was great. So I will give Reign of the Superman a 6.3 out of 10, but let me know what you thought about the movie in the comments, as well as in the poll in the top right corner of the video. If you want to see my full review for The Death of Superman, link will be in the top right corner of this video. But if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.